There is just a lot going on in the news. Up ahead, we'll have details about new dangers lurking in the Central American migrant caravan, the one that's just across our southern border tonight in Tijuana. The caravan is not what they told you it was. We'll tell you what it actually is. And then the question of voter suppression. Voter suppression is a phrase you're hearing a lot lately from Democrats. Suddenly it seems like it's 1956 again. But is voter suppression actually happening in America? We have the numbers on that, the conclusive numbers. Plus, with Christmas upon us, the left is mounting an attack on, naturally, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We'll tell you what they're saying about him. But first tonight, the big news. President Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty in federal court today to lying to Congress. Cohen conceded that he was intentionally wrong. He lied about the dates of an abortive Moscow real estate deal when he testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee last year. Cohen's plea was, of course, big news on cable television. The president responded to it as well. He called Cohen, quote, weak and, quote, not a very smart person. Well, that's objectively true, of course. It's also worth asking why anyone would hire a weak, dumb lawyer. Someday we'll get to the bottom of that. But for now, let's consider what we have just learned about how Washington works. Apparently, it's now an enforceable felony to lie to the U.S. Congress. On one level, that is good news. We should take our own laws seriously. Functional countries do that. Nations in decline set up sanctuary cities and ignore their own borders. Nor is it implausible that Michael Cohen might have broken this law or really any other law. Nobody who knows him is shocked by the allegation. If Cohen was accused of running a cannibalism ring, you'd have to at least take the charge seriously. Anything is possible with that guy. So 3 cheers for law and order. The problem is, if you're going to enforce statutes, you have to enforce them fairly and evenly. The law has to apply to everyone. Otherwise, it's not really the law. It's a political weapon. Michael Cohen is facing 5 years in prison for telling Congress something that he knew was false. How often does that happen in Washington? If you watch C-SPAN, you know the answer. Constantly. All the time. There are almost never consequences, by the way. According to one study, between the Second World War and 2007, a total of only 6 people were convicted of lying to Congress. 6 people in 60 years. In other words, the law is not enforced, and that's why people break it so often. Watch this sworn testimony from 2013. This is not someone you haven't heard of. This is the then Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, assuring the Congress under oath that the NSA absolutely does not spy on American citizens.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Yeah. Clapper lied. He's a liar. There's no debate about that. And yet he wasn't charged for lying under oath. In fact, Clapper got richer after he retired. CNN hired him as an analyst. Pretty much the same thing happened to Jim Comey, the former FBI director. In 2017, Comey claimed, again under oath, that he had never been an anonymous source for news stories while he worked at the FBI. Watch him tell that lie to the Congress.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Yeah, well, according to Comey's longtime deputy who would know, and that would be former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, what Comey said on the tape you just saw is totally untrue. So Comey lied to Congress. But nobody cared. Jim Comey went on to get rich as a pundit selling his book. The same people rooting for Michael Cohen's destruction for lying consider Jim Comey a hero. And then there's former CIA Director John Brennan. Brennan lies constantly. That's well documented. In 2011, for example, Brennan claimed that drone strikes overseas had never, to his knowledge, killed a single non-combatant. That was a total crock. In 2014, Brennan lied and said the CIA had not broken into the computers of Senate staffers. And then last year, under oath before Congress, Brennan said this.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
Yeah, that's a total lie, a flagrant lie, and a significant one about something that affects the life of this country. And yet, you know how the story ends, Brennan was never charged with a felony for lying to the Congress. In fact, just the opposite. Washington rewarded him. Brennan is now an analyst for NBC News. He could be on the air tonight telling you why it's so vitally important that Michael Cohen was charged with lying to Congress. Because we really can't have that. Rule of law, blah, 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 blah. Do you notice a theme here that connects all of these stories? Yes, there is one, and it's simple. The well-connected can do pretty much whatever they want. They can lie to the Congress with impunity, and they do. They can lobby for foreign governments without bothering to register, and they do. If they're rich enough, they can even, I don't know, molest children without being seriously punished. Ask Jeffrey Epstein. He did that. None of this, by the way, is a defense of Michael Cohen. That guy's a creep. He may very well wind up in jail. But if Cohen does wind up in jail, let's hope he's just the first in a long series of prosecutions. If the law is applied to Michael Cohen, then it has to be applied to people who have lied about things that actually matter. Jack Abramoff knows a lot about Washington. He's been here a long time. He's a former lobbyist, and he joins us tonight. Jack Abramoff, you've seen both sides of this. You've been in a position similar to the one Michael Cohen is now, charged with a crime under the lights, and you've also operated freely in Washington. Do you think that I'm overstating the case? Is the law evenly applied in this city?
No, it doesn't seem to be evenly applied or anything close to evenly applied. And I think that this is one of the things that upsets the American people everywhere I go when I speak. People now, instead of ranting against corruption as they normally do, they've identified this as really one of the big problems that you have on the left. A series of people, the list is actually too long even to recite on the air, who have seemingly committed unbelievable crimes, the Clinton Foundation, et cetera, and instead of being punished or prosecuted or indicted, they're running for Congress, like Donna Shalala and others. And so I think that it seems certainly that the justice system in America, even under Republican presidents, is geared to go after people on the right and to ignore people on the left. Again, that's not to excuse Michael Cohen. I don't know what his deeds are, and we'll see what they are. But it seems that people on the left who are doing far worse than that, nobody says a thing about them.
It also seems like the slowest gazelle gets eaten. I mean, Michael Cohen is dumb, if I can just say, someone who knows him, and not personally popular, and obviously he's attached to a very unpopular presidential campaign and a very unpopular candidate. And so he seems like a very natural target, whereas someone like Jim Clapper, who's seen as this wise man, this chin-tugging graybeard, can lie about something deeply significant, about breaking the law. The NSA is not allowed to spy on Americans. And he gets a TV contract. I mean, have you seen, can you think of in your many years here, decades here, an example of someone's really powerful being punished for breaking the law?
No, I can't. I can't think of I mean, certainly since Watergate, and even the people who were punished in Watergate really weren't very powerful people. Right, exactly. No, and I think that the problem for Michael Cohen is he's a gazelle running in the wrong pack.
Right.
If you were running in the left-wing pack, no matter where he is in that pack, because there aren't exactly brilliant gazelles in that pack either.
Exactly.
But that's a more of a protected pack, it seems, for some reason.
Huh. So that's not, and I just want to be totally clear for the fifth time, I'm not defending whatever crime Michael Cohen is accused of committing, and it sounds like he admitted it, okay? He should be punished. But it does seem like that's corrupt. That's not justice when a law is only applied selectively.
Well, it's corrupt and it's corrosive of the view of our system among the American people. There are a lot of people, even people on the left, I've talked to, who say, it doesn't seem like things are really being fairly applied, particularly the Epstein situation, which is absolutely abhorrent.
Yes.
Here's somebody who is molesting children, it seems, and facilitating the molestation of children by other powerful people, and they cut him a deal for 13 months in a county jail, I guess, where he got to leave the jail 6 days a week. Wow. I mean, somebody...
But they confiscated his address book, I notice. And it's online, and you can look at it, and it's fascinating. And a lot of people you and I know personally are in that address book. I don't think any one of them has ever been charged with anything, even though prosecutors knew exactly who he was hanging out with.
Well, from what they say, the deal that he signed actually protected any potential co-conspirators, which is also astonishing. How do you sign a deal like that? I know plenty of people I was in prison with who would love to have had a deal like that.
That's exactly right. If only you'd benefited from that. Jack Abramoff, thank you.
Thanks.
An honest man who's been around. Jerome Corsi appeared on this program just the other night to describe what he believes are Robert Mueller's efforts to entrap him.
And the special prosecutors blow you up. They do this, what I call perjury trap. It's really, they ask you a question. They have material they won't show you. You've forgotten about it. They say, you just lied because this email you forgot about in 2016 proves your current memory is wrong. I mean, it's a memory test.
It's disgusting.
And then they accuse you of lying. It's completely rigged, and it's politically driven by Clinton operatives who have an agenda.
Now, of course, he says he's asked his attorney to draft a criminal complaint of his own to bring against Mueller for misconduct. How do we assess all of this? Elizabeth Price-Foley is a constitutional law professor at Florida International University College of Law, and she joins us tonight. Elizabeth, thank you very much for coming on. If we take 3 steps back, I'm a little bit surprised that this late in the process, we're still talking about Michael Cohen pleading to lying about the date of a perfectly legal real estate transaction that didn't even come to fruition, and Jerome Corsi at 72. This doesn't seem significant. It seems penny ante, and it doesn't seem related to Russian collusion. What is this telling us?
Well, it's telling us how desperate Mueller and his team has become. After almost 2 years of investigating, spending millions of taxpayer dollars with a team of about 15 really aggressive, experienced lawyers, there's no there in terms of substantive evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. So after going hard at high-level Trump confidants and campaign officials, Mike Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, and now Michael Cohen, the best they can manage to do is get single counts of perjury out of some of them. So it shows you that these process crimes are all they've got. They don't actually have any evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, which was their mandate.
But they're playing up the term Russia. And by the way, maybe they have videotape of Trump and Putin in the sauna, dividing up the world or something. I mean, who knows? But as of right now, it seems like there's a lot of Russia. They're planning a real estate deal in Russia. And then once you calm down a little bit, you think, well, is that a crime, actually? Like, why are they telling me this? What does it mean?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not a crime. You're right. I mean, what Michael Cohen supposedly lied about was the timing of Trump Organization's pursuit of this real estate deal in Moscow. He said it ended in January 2016, and now he says it ended in June 2016. But it doesn't matter whether it's January or June of 2016. It was perfectly legal to do so. In fact, it's perfectly legal to do so right now if the Trump Organization wants to do so.
Wait a second. You're saying he was off by 5 months. I mean, that seems like a 5-year sentence to me. Do you think that would be a fair sentence?
I don't know. I mean, ask George Papadopoulos. I think he's serving now 14 days in prison right at this moment for being off by about a month on the timing of his conversation with that Maltese professor, Joseph Mifsud. But it doesn't matter because his Papadopoulos' meeting with Mifsud was perfectly legal to do. Trump Organization's pursuit of a real estate deal in Moscow was perfectly legal to do, even today if they wanted to. So what they got at the end of the day is just sort of misrepresenting the timing of certain things. Not that they didn't tell the Mueller team about those conversations or those deals. They told them about the substance of them. It's simply the timing of them. But look, it tells you that what's happening here is the Mueller team is sort of hoping that Americans have what I call spaghetti brain, which is that they're unable to disassociate two different lines of thought. One is that the Russians interfered in a very sort of bumbling way with the 2016 election, buying those Facebook ads and not being very effective. We admit that they did some of that. That's been documented. But that's one thing, that's one apple, and then the orange is whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to throw the American presidential election. On that issue, there's been absolutely no evidence despite 2 years of very hard investigation. But what the Mueller team and the Democrats on the left are hoping to do is that the Americans will have that that spaghetti brain phenomenon where they'll confuse the two and they'll conflate them. So that if you just say Russia, 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 oh,
right.
look, they lied about something having to do with Russia. There must be collusion, they say.
I mean, they hacked our election. We're at war. Russia!
Right. It's very McCarthyistic, too. I mean, there's a certain irony here, right, that the new Democrats, when they take over the House in January, are going to be having hearings about all of this, and they're going to start sounding a whole heck of a lot like Joseph McCarthy did. So Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler are the new Joseph McCarthys.
I do this with my dogs with squirrels, so I know what it is. Professor, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks.
Stacey Abrams ran for office in Georgia. She lost fair and square, but she still is not conceding and is filing a new lawsuit instead because voter suppression. Was there any? We've got the numbers. Fox News alert for you. We're looking at live pictures of the president's plane, Air Force One, landing in Buenos Aires, Argentina tonight. I think it has just touched down right now. So when he comes out of the plane or if anything interesting happens, obviously we'll go there right away because we're Fox News and we're on it. Want now to sort of tie up, put a bow on the midterm elections. One of the races that we're still talking about is the one that took place in Georgia. The reason we're still talking about it is because one of the candidates has refused to concede, and that has given rise to an extended conversation about something called voter suppression. Turns out that turnout in the Georgia 2018 election was dramatically up over prior midterm years. 57% of registered voters turned out. That compares to less than half in 2010 or 2014. And yet, despite that, the Democrat in the race, Stacey Abrams, says that the election was stolen from her because votes were suppressed. Here's part of what she's saying.
It was not a free and fair election. It was not fair to the thousands who were forced to wait in long lines.
Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the person who won an adequate number of votes.
An adequate number of votes. In other words, more votes than Stacey Abrams got. But she still won't concede, and instead her PAC has filed a lawsuit alleging, that phrase again, voter suppression. So what exactly is voter suppression? Richard Goodstein is a lawyer and a former advisor to the Bill and Hillary Clinton family and campaigns, and he joins us today. Richard, thanks a lot for coming on.
Of course.
So look, I'm totally opposed to voter suppression. I'm for democracy, and always have been. So I think this is worth looking at carefully. But I'm hung up on this kind of logic barrier. If voter turnout was higher than it had been in the previous two elections, how did voter suppression play a role?
So you're enough of a scientist to know that correlation does not prove causality, right? Let me quote.
What does that mean?
Well, what I mean is there was higher turnout all over the country. And here are 5 things that Republican governors and legislators did to suppress the vote over the past few years. Closed polling places, purged eligible voters. They barred felons, which was overturned in Florida. Voter ID was required, which basically that basically cuts against inner city, often minority voters. And early voting was eliminated in states where early voting typically favored Democrats. So those steps were taken. Notwithstanding that, Kemp won. Congratulations. But that doesn't mean that there was no voter suppression.
Okay,
we know those steps
but actually it does mean that, because voter suppression is what it sounds like. It's the suppression of votes. But Stacey Abrams got more votes than any Democrat in 10 years in the state of Georgia. She got more votes than Hillary Clinton got, who was running for president in 2016. And so, where are the votes that were suppressed? She got a historic number of votes. I don't understand. So maybe there were attempts made, but they didn't work by definition, right?
You could have better pitching and still have more home runs, right? Basically, we know that Kemp had tens of thousands of people declared ineligible, and disproportionately those tended to be African Americans.
But no one's claiming they weren't ineligible. They didn't match. The ID didn't. Their voter registration did not match the day of voting form, and that's the law in the state of Georgia. So I'm not sure.
That wasn't the only reason. Again, I think there were plenty of other. Again, there were polling places that were closed. There were various steps that were taken. Look, as a general rule.
But will you at least concede that exit polls suggest that African Americans voted in the same proportion they had in previous elections in the state of Georgia? So there was no exit polling did not detect any drop off in black voting. Period. And her numbers, again, were the highest for any Democrat in 10 years. So will you at least concede that maybe voter suppression, if it existed, wasn't very effective?
No, because in every other state, no, because here's why. You can laugh.
Right,
in every
I am
other state,
laughing.
black vote was up. Right? So the fact that it stayed flat with a black woman at the head of the ticket tells you something was going on to actually suppress it. Yeah, when I say correlation doesn't prove causality, the mere fact that it was flat doesn't mean that it wouldn't have been higher.
Are black people required to vote for black candidates?
Of course not. They tend to.
Oh, they tend to. Is that? But that's not the law. Should it be the law? Is that what you're saying? What are you saying?
I'm saying we know statistically African Americans don't like Donald Trump. They actually did like Stacey Abrams.
Actually, African American men like Donald Trump more than they like Mitt Romney. That's true.
Well, back in 2016, I don't think that's the case anymore.
Okay, we'll see.
We'll find out as well.
All right, Richard, great to see you.
Thank you.
Failed presidential candidate and doomsday prophet Al Gore recently blasted the president as a supervillain who was solely to blame for global warming. Watch this.
Donald J. Trump is now the face of climate denial. And there are those who are still giving him their loyalty and trust, and I get that, believe me, but the vast majority of Americans, not to mention all around the world, are really kind of, they've had it.
Weird he never became president. But Gore is at least more restrained than Jim Shue over on CNN, who said that Trump was going to cause the death of the entire planet by causing it to burn to death.
He keeps saying, well, we have record clean environment, doesn't get to the temperature. We got kids. We don't want to be, slowly burned to death on our own planet here.
The latest The View, meanwhile, argued about whether Trump was trying to suffocate the planet rather than set it on fire.
I think these people would rather have $1 billion in the bank than breathe. I really do. Well, they'd rather have money than breathe.
Do you think that Al Gore would rather have $100 million in the bank than breathe? Because he sold Current TV for $500 million to Al Jazeera, which is its gross domestic product is oil and gas. He made oil money. There's so much hypocrisy on the left with this. I'm sorry, Leonardo DiCaprio had 418 tons of CO2 last year.
He's not.
You want to change hearts and minds? Stop lecturing Americans.
I do take private planes. I'm not going to lie.
It's a fun show, The View. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight. So, Mark, the scientific conversation on warming always begins the same way, which is I'm a good person and you're not, so shut up and obey. This is a global phenomenon. It's happening all around the world, and it's happening in France, where the French government has just said, we want to slow down climate change, so we're taxing gasoline. And there's been this kind of revolution in response from the left and the right. The entire French middle class, tell me if I'm misreading this, has risen up to say, no, this is a scam. You're punishing us under the guise of making the planet better, and we're not putting up with it anymore. Do you think this is part of a global change in the way populations respond to climate hectoring?
Yes, I think so. I think climate hectoring was on the verge of a mass movement around the turn of the century. And then because all the climate models turned out to be disastrous, people came to understand it for what it is, which it's a boutique, niche concern. It's, as the ladies on The View were saying, it's for those who take private jets. So Leonardo DiCaprio and Al Gore can fly by private jet to climate conferences. Al Gore's house in Tennessee has a carbon footprint 20 times bigger than the average American home. But that's because he's being virtuous and using his carbon footprint to save the planet, whereas you, Joe Schlub of 27B Elm Street, need to give up your washing machine and your dryer and be beating your clothes dry with the native women down on the rocks by the river, beating your loincloth dry.
But so let me ask you a sincere question. If you really believed that climate was the greatest challenge we face, why would you even allow private planes to exist? I'm sincere in that question.
Because I think it is actually a form of class war. It's a way, well, in macro terms, it's a way of the developed world denying the developing world any chance to live the kind of lives that people in the developed world live. And then within developed countries, it's a way for elites to tell people that, you know, when it's just Al Gore and the Prince of Wales flying around having climate conferences, everything's fine. But the minute Mr. and Mrs. Joe Schmo want to take a vacation in Florida, then the whole planet's going to broil. It's an elite thing.
Exactly.
Nobody takes it's serious. Al Gore said we had 10 years to save the planet in January 2006. So we're almost 3 years past his sell-by date now. I mentioned the Prince of Wales. He was more specific. He said we had 96 months. So that was June 2017. And we're still here.
I can't believe it.
Saying the world is going to end.
I'm especially glad that you're still here. Mark Stein, one of the few real geniuses I know. Thank you.
I'm way past my sell-by date, Tucker.
Me too. Up ahead, there is new evidence of danger lurking inside the migrant caravan stalled in Tijuana tonight. We'll tell you what it is after the break. Well, there's new evidence of some danger within the migrant caravan now in Tijuana. It's not the people themselves, but the diseases that some of them could be carrying, and this is according to Mexican officials. Tijuana doctors say that 1/3 of caravan members are being treated for some kind of health issue. There are about 6,000 people in the caravan. More than 100 have lice or skin infections, 4 have HIV, 3 tuberculosis at least. Now, if these migrants are allowed into this country, no questions asked, of course, treating their ailments will become our responsibility. That's what we already do for illegal immigrants currently here, about 22 million of them. Meanwhile, an MS-13 member recently captured by the Border Patrol says he came with the caravan. You think he's the only one who came with the caravan? If you do, congratulations, you can be the new CNN White House reporter. Well, American elites lecture us on the importance of letting in anyone who wishes to move here into our country because immigrants are better than we are. Life for actual Americans continues to get worse, and measurably so. New data show that in 2017, life expectancy for American middle-class citizens fell yet again, thanks in part to 70,000 drug OD deaths and the highest suicide rate in 50 years. It's not a stretch to say that life for ordinary people in this country is getting not simply shorter, but worse. And the most remarkable thing of all is that nobody seems to care. Tammy Bruce is a radio host and president of Independent Women's Voice, and obviously a fixture on this show, and we're grateful for that. So, Tammy, I guess what's so striking about this is not simply why it's happening, but the reaction you're seeing in Washington, or the lack of. I mean, if this were happening to any other group, Syrian refugees, migrant caravan members, if they were dying younger, wouldn't there be a national outcry about that?
Well, we do have national outcries when we see major events happen, like, let's say, the AIDS crisis, right?
Right,
and we
exactly.
move in to make a difference. We want to do that. But the 70,000 overdoses you mentioned, Tucker, is more than the combined U.S. deaths in the Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq war combined. So of all those wars that have, hurt the soul of this country, 1 year, 2017, 70,000 overdose deaths, more than the deaths in those wars combined. And then you have 47,000 suicides, which is an astounding number. But what we've got here is a government, and people say it's hopelessness, and we know that, of course, people turn to something like that, but the American people are resilient. What is new, and the CDC statistician guy said they've never seen numbers like this, but what's new is the opioid crisis, our action against that, and then Americans turning to illegal street narcotics like heroin and fentanyl. And I contend that they're not saying much about this because you have the start of it was through Obamacare and the healthcare dynamic of taking a pill instead of having a surgery because it was cheaper.
That's right.
But then also, now, in order to deal with this, 90% of the opioids, the fentanyl, the synthetic that is coming into this country is from Mexico, is from the southern border. It's a combination of Chinese influence as well, but it's Mexican. It's the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. So in order to deal with this, Tucker, we'd have to actually talk seriously about border security, and we can't do that because then that would make Donald Trump look right. So we've got so many Americans being sacrificed because politicians don't want to have a conversation about security at the border.
Every time I bring this up on this show, the person I'm debating blames America. It's a demand problem.
That's right.
Okay, it tells you
it's not. This is a big government problem established by the government, Americans abandoned, and then a refusal to address a core of what we could do, and then deal also with addiction, which we have to do, but deal with that core at the border, and they're not willing to do it.
Tammy Bruce, thank you for that incisive analysis. Time now for Final Exam. Can you beat the experts at remembering what happened in the news this week? This week we have a special showdown between former Trump campaign chairman Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossie, his co-author of a new book, a highly divisive Final Exam, after the break. Oh, the best moment of the week, a respite from the sad reality of modern life. Final Exam, where we quiz top figures in the news to see if they can remember what actually happened over the past 7 days. We've got a special version of Final Exam tonight. Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie are the co-authors of a brand new book called Trump's Enemies, How the Deep State is Undermining the President. We thought it'd be interesting to set co-author against co-author. They join us tonight. I cannot believe you agreed to do this.
We're ready. We're excited.
We're not above stunt casting the segment. That's exactly what we're doing tonight. All right. I'm not even going to bet. There is a kind of line in the studio on who's going to win, but I'm not going to tell you who's favored. I am going to read you the rules, though, so you know. That's right. And no cheating. Okay?
Then he's out. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
We're watching carefully. Okay, hands on buzzers. I ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer the question. This is key. You have to wait until I finish asking before you answer. You can answer once I acknowledge you by saying your name. Each correct answer worth 1 point. Each incorrect answer detracts a point from your total. So it's a very fluid scoring system. Best of 5 wins.
That's
you ready?
Points for you. He can't count that out.
He can't count. I don't know. He may have the voice advantage, but we'll see. We'll see who's faster. Question 1. By order of the National Game Show Commission, we have to begin with an animal question. That's the law. So here we go. The internet has gone crazy for a very unusual 4-legged farm animal in Australia. This animal weighs over 3,000 pounds. It is as tall as Michael Jordan. He is so different from all the other farm animals that they follow him around as if he were a deity. What kind of animal is he? Corey Lewandowski.
Moo! Cow.
I was going to say moose.
He did say moose.
Is it a cow? There's no way a cow can be 3,000 pounds and 6 feet tall. Is it a cow?
6 foot 4 inches. That's the size of the utterly giant cow. Its name is Knickers, and he's now the laughing stock, weighing in at 3,000 pounds.
You will not find Knickers on your plate, just to be clear here. He's too big to process as the owner, so he's going to live happily ever after.
Can we just pause and appreciate Kilmeade for a second? He said it's utterly.
Of course.
Just want to appreciate that. All right, question 2. Forbes is out with its annual list of the highest paid television stars. Topping the list is not me. It's a woman from Brooklyn who has made nearly $150 million in the past year. Her show has been on television since 1996. Who is she? Corey.
Judge Judy.
Man, you're fast.
This is ridiculous.
$150 million a year for Judge Judy?
Who's the highest paid TV host of all? And here's the answer.
Boom.
Lady on the left, Judge Judy. Wait for the number. $147 million in the past year.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
Ellen DeGeneres, number 2, $87 million. Dr. Phil, $77 million. Ryan Seacrest, $74 million. Steve Harvey, $44 million.
So what are we doing wrong here at Fox? By the way, our judges just said that they've checked the circuitry in the buzzing devices and that both of you buzzed in, you were just slightly faster.
Story of my life. Well, that's so true.
God,
that's so true.
Rubbing it in. Question 3. At a rally in Mississippi, the President of the United States told the crowd that as a young man, people told him he looked like which famous American icon? Dave, you blew it! Corey.
At least it works. Robert Redford.
It sounded like the question ended, say our judges. See, I'm not in charge of making these rules. They are giving you a pass because they say it sounded like I'd finished the question. So you get to answer it. Which
Elvis.
American? Elvis! Man, you guys are hair trigger. Is it Elvis?
Other than the blonde hair, when I was growing up, they said I looked like Elvis. You see that? Could you believe it? I always consider that a great compliment.
You guys have spent a lot of time on the president. Ever heard him sing?
No. Not even for a second.
Not even for a second. All right.
We listen to Tiny Dancer a few times. We listen to, you liked Elton John a lot.
I know you have. Such a sensitive song. I love it. All right, question 4. And it's 2-1, by the way. This is a multiple choice about the weirdest video of the week. An American tourist had a near-death experience high above the Swiss Alps after somebody forgot to buckle his safety harness and left him holding on for dear life. Which activity was the man doing at the time? Was it A, hang gliding, B, bungee jumping, C, skydiving? Corey.
Hang gliding with the creepy porn lawyer.
Seriously? CPL was there?
Yes.
We're not going to hold you to that. Was it hang gliding, as Corey said?
a first-time hang glider holding on for dear life. His safety harness was not connected. He was left clinging to the pilot. The pilot was trying to land somewhere quickly, but he had trouble controlling that glider because he was steering with one hand.
Could be porn lawyer can't even hold on to his clients, much less a hang glider. All right, final question. This one also multiple choice. First Lady Melania Trump has unveiled the Christmas decorations at the White House. They feature tens of thousands of red ornaments. What is this year's theme? Is it A, Winter Wonderland, B, Blessings from the Heartland, or C, American Treasures? Corey.
American Treasures.
Is it, okay, let me just say, you're a savage animal. Can I just say that? You are. It's unbelievable. Is it C, American Treasures?
American Treasures. Each room inside the White House highlights different American cities, presidents, and traditions.
It's unbelievable.
There are more than 14,000 red ornaments hanging from 29 trees this year, and there's a gingerbread house.
Hey, Tucker, I never get tired of winning.
You know, you are, and by the way, I'm looking, we have a mug. It's our Eric Wempel mug, and I don't know where it is. So they're back ordered. So we're going to give you the Golden Retriever mug instead, which I hope, So
Can I come back and defend my title?
Yes, you can defend your title. Boom. Anytime. And Mr. Bossy, I hope you will come back too. And I know that you let him win because he's your co-author.
You know what? He needs to feel a little better about himself, so I let him win.
You're still splitting the royalties 50-50. Gentlemen, thank you. It was great to see you. That's it for this week's Final Exam. Pay close attention to the news all week and tune in next week to see if you can beat the pros. We'll be right back. Well, there's new evidence of some danger within the migrant caravan now in Tijuana. It's not the people themselves, but the diseases that some of them could be carrying, and this is according to Mexican officials. Tijuana doctors say that 1/3 of caravan members are being treated for some kind of health issue. There are about 6,000 people in the caravan. More than 100 have lice or skin infections, 4 have HIV, 3 tuberculosis at least. Now, if these migrants are allowed into this country, no questions asked, of course, treating their ailments will become our responsibility. That's what we already do for illegal immigrants currently here, about 22 million of them. Meanwhile, an MS-13 member recently captured by the Border Patrol says he came with the caravan. You think he's the only one who came with the caravan? If you do, congratulations, you can be the new CNN White House reporter. Well, American elites lecture us on the importance of letting in anyone who wishes to move here into our country because immigrants are better than we are. Life for actual Americans continues to get worse, and measurably so. New data show that in 2017, life expectancy for American middle-class citizens fell yet again, thanks in part to 70,000 drug OD deaths and the highest suicide rate in 50 years. It's not a stretch to say that life for ordinary people in this country is getting not simply shorter, but worse. And the most remarkable thing of all is that nobody seems to care. Tammy Bruce is a radio host and president of Independent Women's Voice, and obviously a fixture on this show, and we're grateful for that. So, Tammy, I guess what's so striking about this is not simply why it's happening, but the reaction you're seeing in Washington, or the lack of. I mean, if this were happening to any other group, Syrian refugees, migrant caravan members, if they were dying younger, wouldn't there be a national outcry about that?
Well, we do have national outcries when we see major events happen, like, let's say, the AIDS crisis, right?
Right,
and we
exactly.
move in to make a difference. We want to do that. But the 70,000 overdoses you mentioned, Tucker, is more than the combined U.S. deaths in the Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq war combined. So of all those wars that have, hurt the soul of this country, 1 year, 2017, 70,000 overdose deaths, more than the deaths in those wars combined. And then you have 47,000 suicides, which is an astounding number. But what we've got here is a government, and people say it's hopelessness, and we know that, of course, people turn to something like that, but the American people are resilient. What is new, and the CDC statistician guy said they've never seen numbers like this, but what's new is the opioid crisis, our action against that, and then Americans turning to illegal street narcotics like heroin and fentanyl. And I contend that they're not saying much about this because you have the start of it was through Obamacare and the healthcare dynamic of taking a pill instead of having a surgery because it was cheaper.
That's right.
But then also, now, in order to deal with this, And 90% of the opioids, the fentanyl, the synthetic that is coming into this country is from Mexico, is from the southern border. It's a combination of Chinese influence as well, but it's Mexican. It's the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. So in order to deal with this, Tucker, we'd have to actually talk seriously about border security. And we can't do that because then that would make Donald Trump look right. So we've got so many Americans being sacrificed because politicians don't want to have a conversation about security at the border.
Every time I bring this up on this show, the person I'm debating blames America. It's a demand problem.
That's right.
Okay, it tells you
it's not.